brought to you by Form Systems, the leader in API and cloud gateway technology.
Hello, I'm Elena, and I'm part of the apiculture team, and I'm here to talk about sentiment analysis APIs. As I said, my team is apiculture. If you speak a language like Spanish or French or Italian, and you see the name apiculture and the logo is a bee, it makes sense for you, because in these languages, apiculture or something similar means beekeeping. But the word apiculture doesn't mean anything like that in English, so you can really see people that speak English they feel very confused about, I see the APIs, I see the culture, but what's with the bees? So you'll be seeing a lot of bees in the slides. That's the reason for that. So in apiculture, we create natural language processing APIs, and I'll be talking particularly about sentiment analysis, just to be sure we're all in the same track. Sentiment analysis is the technique that allows us to know what's being expressed in a text is an opinion, and in case it's an opinion, is it positive or is it negative? Is it saying something good or something bad? And this is used in many industries because companies and brands want to know what's being said about them, and if they're being criticized or if they're being praised, and what about. So the thing that we have to do when we want to do sentiment analysis is that we have to understand what's being said on a text. So that requires quite some very complex tasks, because understanding text is not easy. So what we've done, and what I'm here to tell you about, is how we divided this challenge, that is understanding language, into smaller pieces, and how we created smaller pieces that covered different aspects of language. And with that, we were able to create this API that performs sentiment analysis. So I'll be telling you about the 4 main challenges that we encountered when we wanted to understand what's being said on a text. And the first one, and the easiest one, is vocabulary, knowing what words exist in a certain language. The fact that vocabulary is an English word, vocabulary might be a typo for the English word vocabulary, and that blah, 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 will be a string that has no meaning in that language. It doesn't exist. So what we need to have is the set of possible strings that we can have in that language. So it would be like having the headwords that appear in a dictionary, just the headwords. But that's not enough, because as we know, speakers tend to invent a lot of words. And you'll be surprised to see how many of the words that we use normally don't appear in dictionaries. This might be because it might be a new word. We all invent new words. And because depending on the language that we speak, in a language, for instance, like French or Spanish or Italian, Latin-derived languages, we tend to vary a lot the words because of grammatical reasons. I'll give you an example of this. In languages like Spanish, for every verb, we have more than 100 forms, depending if we want to use the verb in the present, in the past, if it was me who did it, if it was you who did it. This is very different, for instance, in English. It doesn't change that much, but in some languages, morphological rules are very important, because words tend to vary a lot. So we need to have the rules for word building. Because if we have the set of possible words, and we have the rules of how words can be built, then we have a better coverage of what's being said on a text. That's me seeing if a verb is correctly conjugated. We also have to know how words combine with each other, because that's what syntax is about. How words combine with each other to create meaning. And syntax is going to give us information like, is it a negative we have a verb, does it have the particle don't in front of it? Then it's going to be a different meaning, and it's going to be a different context than if it doesn't. So seeing what words appear together and how they work together is going to give us also the important information. And things like, it's not the same that Peter likes Mary, that Mary likes Peter. So how the word order, how these words connect with one another is going to have a very important role concerning meaning. Meaning is going to be the point where we know if a word has a particular connotation or not? Does this word have a positive sense? Does this word have a negative sense? That's when we have to create lexical resources that give us that kind of information. And this lady over here is one of the main lexicographers for Spanish dictionaries. She's called Maria Moliner, and she's one of the main dictionaries in the Spanish language. And this kind of resources, dictionaries, are very useful for this kind of task. They're useful for the vocabulary stage, when we need to know what are the headwords that we want to have, but the fact that we have very complete dictionaries will give us the idea of this word and this word have a similar meaning, they're synonyms, or this word and this word tend to appear together, or this word with this particular sense has a positive or a negative meaning. So this kind of information can be very useful to build these kind of resources. So, okay, let's say we've covered the vocabulary, let's say we've covered word building, we've covered syntax, and we've covered meaning. Then we discover that humans use language in unpredictable ways. And then you find new challenges that have to be tackled. So, if language was like this, if language was regular and easy to predict, everything will be easier. But for me, this is a better drawing of what language looks like. It's very poetic, it's very symbolic, it's ambiguous. And ambiguity is one of the main things that have to be covered in this when we want to do sentiment analysis. I'm going to give you some examples of ambiguity and how they can be solved in the different stages that I just mentioned. The word cold, for instance, is an adjective if we use it in a sentence like with cold drink. But it will be a different sense and it will be a different word if we use it in a sentence like I got a cold. Syntax, in the syntax stage, we would know here that because cold is followed by drink and drink is a noun, then cold must be an adjective. And because I got a cold, in that sentence, cold is preceded by a cold, then it must be a noun. At the syntax stage, at that point, is where we can know this type of thing. Let's say, the English language it tends to do this a lot. You have a word, and depending on where you place it in the sentence, it will be one thing or another. If you use a word in the place of a verb, in the English language, it will be a verb. And this image over here, I don't mean to go all language nerd on you, but I just legit, adverb, adverb, and adjective language nerd. This is very typical for the English language. That means that word order, that means syntax, is very important for the English language analysis. In other languages like Spanish or French, it's more important word building. Why? Because if you speak French or Spanish, you'll know that we can't take just the word, for instance, Google, and transform it into a verb just like that. English can do that. You can say, I just Googled that, or I'm Googling, or Google it. But we can't do that in French or Spanish, for instance. If we want to transform the word Google into a verb, we have to add something at the end that transforms it into a verb. That means that morphological rules, that means word building, is more important for Latin-derived languages than English. Let's say we already know that cold is an adjective in a given sentence. Is it positive or negative? Because we know that a word like awful is not very positive and that brilliant will be positive. But what about the word cold? Well, it would be positive when applied to something like lemonade, because lemonade is supposed to be cold. I don't think I'd like to have hot lemonade. But what happens if it's applied to coffee? Coffee is supposed to be a hot beverage. So it's likely that if we're applying the word cold to coffee, it's not a very good thing. It will have a negative connotation. But we could also have coffee with ice. In Spain, that's something that we sometimes order, coffee with ice if it's very hot. I remember the first time I ordered coffee with ice in France, and the waiter looked at me as if I was crazy. This is something that I discovered it's not international, but in Spain we can have coffee with ice. And what happened if we applied cold to something like a room in a hotel? In that sense, it's very likely that it will be a negative meaning, because rooms in a hotel are expected to be warm or cozy, and even if we want to say that it had air conditioning, we would say it was fresh or cool, but not cold. So in this type of ambiguity, is meaning who is going to give us the key if something is positive or not. If we know that lemonade is a type of drink that is supposed to be taken cold, we'll know that cold lemonade is okay. But if we know that coffee is a type of beverage that is supposed to be hot, or that a room in a hotel is supposed to be at least warm or cool but not cold, then we'll know that cold, when applied to a hotel room or coffee, it's negative. But we can't say that cold, just isolated, is it good or bad? We can't not say that. This is another type of ambiguous sentence. I love these two sentences because they are the type of sentences you never come across, but they are always being discussed. I saw her duck. This can be ambiguous because I could have a friend called Anna, and my friend Anna has a duck as a pet. I went into her house and I saw her duck. I saw her pet, I saw her duck. But Anna could also be doing like this, which is the verb to duck. So I saw her while she was ducking, I saw her duck. So it's an ambiguous sentence. Slightly different, but also ambiguous, is the sentence, I saw him with the telescope. Was it me that I was using a telescope to see him, or I was looking at him while he was using a telescope? Okay, it's a slightly different ambiguity than the previous case, where we saw that it was either meaning or either syntax who gave us the key. In this type of ambiguity, it's context who is going to give us the key. Words and sentences don't appear isolated, and we can know, because of the words that appear around, if a sentence or a word has a meaning or another. I'll give you an example about the context. If we have a text where we are talking about my friend who has a duck, we'll know that if the sentence, I saw her duck, which is not that likely to appear, but if it appears, we would know that it's referring to the I saw a duck, I saw her duck, not the other one. So it's context, the idea that words don't appear isolated. We have to understand what's going on in the text, and then we'll know if it's referring to one thing or another. So once we know how to deal with vocabulary of a language, we know how to deal with word building, syntax, and meaning, and we are analyzing the context in which a word and a sentence appear, and then you are happy and you can know if something has a positive meaning or negative meaning. We were very happy and very glad about our sentiment analysis API. And then we got a phone call from Colombia. Our API analyzes if something is positive or negative for the Spanish language, and we had built that resource for European Spanish. And then they called it from Colombia, and they said, we'd like to apply this web service you've created to our brand, who analyzes tweets that are written in Spanish, but from Colombia. So this problem also applies to languages like English or French, that are spoken worldwide, and that have the problem that, yes, they are the same language, but there are subtle differences. So we had to, in order to make it a good resource also for Spanish in Colombia, we had to go all the way again through the 4 stages that we had done previously. The word building and the syntax were not really affected because they're more grammar, more deep. But things like vocabulary, what words are used, and the meaning that they have, they had to be changed and they had to be improved in order to cover this. It's not a different language, but it really makes you wonder what makes us call a new language, and why we call Spanish to a language that is spoken worldwide with enormous differences. And I guess this is similar to what happened in French, for instance, or what happened in English, especially about connotation. The things that have a positive meaning or a negative meaning, it changes a lot because it's also it's very close to culture, so and to society. So the way words are used can vary a lot depending on part of the world you're talking it, even if it's the same language. So that's the things that we learned when trying to build a sentiment analysis API, and the challenge that we have to cover. And I think that's everything on my side.
Brought to you by Form Systems, the leader in API and cloud gateway technology.